Let me tell you about the time I found out my wife, Melissa, was cheating on me. Yeah, I know, it's one of those stories you think will never happen to you, until it does. We had been together for over a decade, married for nearly 10 years, and I genuinely thought we were solid. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I never saw it coming. And that's the kicker, isn't it? You never see it coming. It all started when my best friend, Michael, hit me up out of the blue one evening. He invited me out for a drink, which wasn't out of the ordinary, but I could sense something was off in his voice. Michael and I have known each other forever, so I can read him pretty well. We met at this quiet little bar, and after some small talk, a couple of drinks, he finally dropped the bomb on me. "I need to tell you something, man, and you're not going to like it," he said, staring into his beer like it had all the answers. I braced myself. At first, he hesitated, like he didn't want to be the one to rip my world apart, but he pushed through. He told me he had seen Melissa at a restaurant. Not a big deal, right? But she wasn't alone. She was with some other guy, and Michael swore it didn't look innocent. Then he hit me with the worst part. He saw them kissing. And it wasn't one of those casual, friendly pecks you see between close friends. No, this was different. He knew it, and I could tell just by the way he was telling me that it was bad. I can't even describe how I felt in that moment. It was like someone took a baseball bat to my chest. My first instinct was to deny it, to tell myself it was a misunderstanding, that there was no way Melissa would do that to me. But at the same time, I could feel this pit forming in my stomach. A part of me knew Michael wasn't lying or exaggerating. He wouldn't do that to me. I went through a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, confusion, betrayal. How could this be happening? Melissa and I had built a life together, and she was out there kissing some random guy behind my back. How long had this been going on? Was this a one-time thing? Or had I been a complete fool for who knows how long? I couldn't help but replay every interaction with her over the past few weeks, trying to figure out if there were signs that I missed. Every smile, every kiss, every time she came home late or acted distant, it all started to feel like pieces of a puzzle that I hadn't been smart enough to put together. But I'm not the type to act without thinking things through. My first instinct wasn't to confront her. Not right away, at least. No, I wanted to bide my time. Let it simmer. I figured the best way to handle this was to be strategic. If I was going to blow up my marriage, I wanted to make sure I came out on top. The revenge fantasies started swirling in my head almost immediately. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. But, man, I had no idea how to make her pay in a way that would feel even remotely satisfying. The days that followed were the worst. Pretending like everything was normal when I was dying inside. Every time she smiled at me, I wanted to throw up. I couldn't even look at her without picturing her with that guy. And she had no clue that I knew. She kept going on with her life like nothing had changed, like she wasn't lying to my face every single day. But the worst part? I still loved her. Or at least I thought I did. I was angry, sure, but there was this part of me that didn't want to believe she could really do this. I kept telling myself maybe Michael got it wrong. Maybe he misinterpreted the whole thing. But deep down, I knew the truth. Then about a week later, Melissa dropped a bombshell of her own. We were having dinner, just the two of us, and out of nowhere, she starts talking about open relationships. I almost choked on my food. I mean, we were married for a decade, and she decides to bring this up now. At first, I thought she was joking or trying to be edgy, but nope. She was dead serious. She started rambling on about how modern couples were exploring open marriages and how it could be refreshing for us. Refreshing? The woman was out there screwing around behind my back, and now she wanted my blessing to keep doing it? The nerve. It hit me like a truck. This was her way of covering her ass. She wasn't happy with just one guy. She wanted to have her cake and eat it too. And she thought I was so stupid or so spineless that I'd go along with it. I felt this wave of disgust roll over me. She was trying to manipulate me, to twist things around so that her affair didn't seem like cheating anymore. It was brilliant in a twisted way. Instead of admitting what she'd been doing, she wanted to rebrand it as something progressive. What a joke. I wanted to explode. I wanted to stand up right there, flip the table, and tell her I knew everything. But I didn't. I swallowed the rage, kept my face as neutral as I could, and agreed to it. That's right, I told her it was a good idea. I could see the surprise flicker across her face for a split second, but she recovered quickly and smiled like she had just won a prize. In that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. You see, By agreeing to her little open relationship idea, I had bought myself time. Time to come up with a plan that would completely destroy her. This wasn't just about getting even. I wanted to make sure she felt every ounce of pain she had put me through. And trust me, I had some ideas brewing. But that's for later. Right now, all I had to do was pretend like everything was fine, while quietly setting the stage for the ultimate revenge. She had no idea what was coming. She thought she had outsmarted me, that she was in control. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people like Melissa always think they're the smartest person in the room, until they're not. After agreeing to Melissa's absurd open relationship idea, I knew I had the upper hand, and the clock was ticking. The question wasn't if I was going to get my revenge, but how. Melissa had no idea what was coming. It wasn't enough to just catch her cheating and call it quits. I wanted her to feel the same betrayal she'd thrown at me. So I started planning, and I started with Sarah. Sarah and Melissa had been best friends for years. You know, the type that shared everything. I'm talking about the kind of friendship where you can't have a conversation with your wife without her telling Sarah every little detail afterward. But here's the kicker. Melissa hadn't told Sarah about her little affair. I figured it was probably out of shame, or maybe she didn't want to admit she was doing the exact thing she once called disgusting when it happened to one of their friends. Either way, this gap between them was a gift to me, and I planned to use it. I knew if I played this right, Sarah could be my way in and possibly the ultimate blow to Melissa. So, I arranged to meet Sarah for coffee, spinning some bullshit story about how I wanted to talk about Melissa's proposal for an open relationship. Sarah didn't hesitate to meet up. I think part of her was genuinely curious, and maybe a little protective of her friend. She probably thought she'd be playing therapist to me or something, helping me open my mind to the idea of letting my wife screw other guys. Yeah, no thanks. We met at this cozy little cafe, the kind of place that feels intimate but isn't too loud. Perfect for what I was about to do. As we sat down and ordered our drinks, I could tell Sarah was already itching to dive into the conversation. I kept it light at first, just asking about her and Melissa, pretending like I was totally on board with this new arrangement. Then, I casually brought up Melissa's suggestion of sexual experimentation, framing it as a spice-up idea for our marriage. I'm not gonna lie, I said, leaning back in my chair with a sigh. The whole open relationship thing, it's not exactly something I ever thought I'd be talking about. But I guess, in a way, Melissa's right. Maybe it's time to explore something new. Sarah's eyes widened. She was intrigued. You could almost see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to make sense of this new side of me she'd never seen before. Well, yeah, Melissa has mentioned that she thinks couples who experiment are healthier in the long run, Sarah said, taking a sip of her latte. She really thinks this could be refreshing. Exactly. I agreed, nodding like I was some open-minded husband embracing his new progressive life. I could feel the tension in the air shifting. She was warming up to the idea, and this was my moment. Actually, Melissa had an idea. I continued, lowering my voice a bit to make it sound more intimate. She suggested, well, since we're friends, that maybe you and I could, explore something together. Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. I swear, for a split second, she looked like she couldn't decide if she was horrified or intrigued. The thought of crossing that line was clearly something she hadn't considered before. Wait, what? She asked, trying to laugh it off, but I could see the curiosity was there. You're telling me Melissa suggested that you and I? Yeah, I said, leaning in a little closer. Look, I know it sounds crazy, but that's the whole point of an open relationship, right? Trying new things with people you trust. I was laying it on thick, and I knew it, but Sarah was already biting. I could see her trying to justify it to herself, just like I knew she would. It was the alcohol and the thrill of doing something taboo that made her hesitant, not the idea itself. At first, she hesitated. I don't know, Derek. This seems... I don't think Melissa would be okay with it, she said, biting her lip, her fingers playing with the edge of her coffee cup. Classic Sarah, always trying to do the right thing, but unable to resist a little danger when it's offered. Trust me, I replied, keeping my tone confident. Melissa suggested it. She wants us to explore, and she thought you and I, being so close, would be a good place to start. I could tell Sarah's walls were coming down. She was curious, tempted. She just didn't want it to get awkward, That's why I'm bringing it up casually like this. Now, maybe a part of her thought this was too weird, but I was banking on another part of her. the part that secretly liked the idea of doing something forbidden. And let's be real, this wasn't about me. It was about the thrill, the excitement, the rush of crossing a line she never thought she'd cross. I knew that was the real motivator here. We sat there for what felt like forever, her mind clearly racing, and then I did what I knew would seal the deal. I shifted the conversation from hypothetical to personal. I mean, come on, Sarah. Haven't you ever thought about what it would be like? Just once? No strings, no pressure. Melissa wouldn't even have to know. I could see the struggle in her eyes, the conflict between what was right and what was exciting. After a few more drinks and some flirty back and forth, she finally caved. Maybe just once, she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe she was agreeing to this. That's when I knew I had her. And with her, I had the perfect tool to crush Melissa. It was game on now. Sarah didn't know it yet, but she had just signed up for a front row seat in the biggest shitstorm of her life. The best part? Melissa had no idea that her best friend was about to be part of the revenge plan. I could already picture it, the fallout, the destruction of their friendship, the betrayal that would hit her twice as hard as it hit me. I smiled at Sarah, thanked her for the chat, and left the cafe knowing that I had just set the stage for my next move. Melissa thought she was smart, playing me like a fool, but she was about to learn a hard lesson in what happens when you push someone too far. All I had to do now was wait for the perfect moment to strike. And trust me, when the time came, it was going to be glorious. Now that I had Sarah locked in and the stage set for Melissa's ultimate betrayal, it was time to deal with the other half of this twisted equation, her lover. I wasn't about to let him walk away without a taste of the chaos he'd helped create. He thought he was smart, sneaking around with another man's wife, probably thinking he'd never get caught. But he was about to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong husband. I brought Michael into the loop again. He had already proven he was down for whatever, and this next step was going to require some finesse. You see, Michael had some useful connections, people who could find out things others couldn't. I didn't even know the guy's name at this point, but with a few phone calls, Michael tracked him down. We learned enough to put my next plan into motion. We set up a meeting under the guise of a friendly chat. The guy had no clue what he was walking into. Michael made it seem like it was just a casual get-together, nothing suspicious, just a couple of guys catching up. When we showed up at the bar where we arranged to meet him, I immediately sized him up. He wasn't anything special, tall, fit. That typical smug looked like he was better than the rest of us. I could see why Melissa went for him. He had that polished, charming vibe, but I could tell he was the type to crumble when real pressure was applied. And that's exactly what I intended to do. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, ordered some drinks, and I sat back, letting Michael take the lead. The whole time I kept my cool. The last thing I wanted was to tip him off. It wasn't time for confrontation, not yet. First, we had to make sure he understood the situation. Michael, smooth as always, started dropping subtle hints. He didn't come right out and accuse the guy, but he danced around the subject, bringing up random things that only someone in the know could pick up on. He mentioned certain dates, talked about a restaurant Melissa and this guy had been spotted at. Each time, I could see the guy's posture shift slightly, his body stiffening as it dawned on him that we weren't just there for beers. At one point, I caught the guy glancing at his phone, probably wondering if Melissa had texted him, or maybe just itching to get out of there. That's when I leaned forward, locking eyes with him for the first time in the conversation. You know, I said, my voice calm but heavy with meaning, we've got this weird situation going on. Seems like my wife has been a little too friendly with someone lately. His face went pale, and I knew he understood exactly what I was saying. But before he could deny it or even open his mouth, I continued, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to cause a scene. That's not really my style. I paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. But there's something you need to know. See, I'm aware of an upcoming date you've got planned with her. A little rendezvous that's not going to happen. He blinked, visibly caught off guard. What are you talking about? He finally asked, trying to play dumb. But the crack in his voice betrayed him. He was nervous, and he should have been. Michael jumped in at this point, leaning back casually but with a deadly seriousness in his tone. We're not asking, he said. We're telling. You cancel that date, and you stop answering her calls. If you don't, things are going to get uncomfortable for you. And trust me, you don't want that. The guy fumbled for his drink, trying to hide the fact that his hands were shaking. It It was almost pathetic how quickly his confident facade melted away. He could sense we weren't messing around, that this wasn't some idle threat. I knew he was trying to weigh his options, but the truth was he didn't have any. The only move he had left was to back off and hope I didn't take this any further. For a few tense moments, he didn't say anything, just sat there with that deer-in-the-headlights look. Then finally he nodded. Yeah, all right, he muttered, clearly uncomfortable. I won't show up. I won't answer her anymore. I could already see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't just afraid of me and Michael. He was probably starting to realize how deep he was in this mess. He had no idea what else I had up my sleeve, and the fear of the unknown was eating at him. Perfect. With that confirmation, Michael and I exchanged a brief glance. We'd accomplished what we came for, and I knew I had just taken the first real step toward the total collapse of Melissa's little fantasy world. The guy left the bar in a hurry, practically tripping over himself on the way out. Watching him go, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Melissa had no idea the storm that was about to hit her. I could already picture her sitting alone, waiting for this guy to show up, completely clueless that her perfect little affair was crumbling right before her eyes. As we finished our drinks, Michael chuckled. Man, did you see his face? He looked like he was about to piss himself. I laughed too, but there was still a heavy weight in my chest. This wasn't over. Sure, confronting the guy was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. Melissa wasn't going to get away with this that easily. This was just the beginning. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about what came next. The revenge, the destruction of her trust, everything I'd been planning. It all felt so close yet so far. But knowing that Melissa's lover had been scared off was a small victory. She was about to experience a whole new level of frustration, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. Now that the guy was out of the picture, it was time to turn up the heat on Melissa. I could already see her sitting there, confused and frustrated, wondering why her lover hadn't shown up. Maybe she'd start doubting him. Maybe she'd even start doubting herself. The irony was almost too sweet. But this was only the beginning of her troubles. What came next was going to tear her world apart, piece by piece. And I wasn't just going to sit back and watch. I was going to be right in the middle of it, making sure every second of her downfall hurt as much as possible. I'll never forget the night everything finally came crashing down. It was the night I'd been building toward for weeks, and to be honest, I hadn't been this excited about anything in a long time. Melissa, completely unaware of the storm I was about to unleash, had headed out for her date like everything was business as usual. She thought she was going to spend another evening with her lover, probably playing me for a fool while pretending her little charade of an open relationship was something I'd actually bought into. What she didn't know, of course, was that her boy toy wasn't showing up. He was probably too busy trying to keep his pants dry after our little conversation with him. Meanwhile, I had my own plans for the night, and they didn't involve sitting around sulking while she cheated on me. Nope. I was done being the passive, clueless husband. I had set the scene perfectly. After sending Melissa off with some half-hearted kiss and a phony smile, I called Sarah over. She showed up, clueless as to what was about to go down. She thought we were going to have some fun under the umbrella of this new, open relationship idea Melissa had pitched. I could tell Sarah was still a little unsure about the whole thing, but that hesitation melted away soon enough once the wine started flowing. I made sure the place was set up just right. Candles flickering, soft music in the background. It was romantic, intimate, all the things Melissa probably thought she had exclusive rights to in our marriage. But tonight, those things belonged to me and Sarah. We talked, laughed, drank a little more wine, and pretty soon the conversation started drifting toward more personal topics. The tension was thick, and I could tell Sarah was just waiting for me to make the first move. And so I did. Things escalated quickly. One second we were sitting on the couch talking about nonsense, and the next we were tearing into each other like teenagers at a house party. Clothes came off, inhibitions dropped, and we ended up in bed, wrapped up in the kind of passion that was more about revenge than lust. It wasn't about Sarah. It never was. This was about Melissa, about taking something from her, about letting her know that she wasn't the only one who could play dirty. And wouldn't you know it, right in the middle of it, the front door opened. Melissa came home earlier than I expected, probably because her little romantic evening with Loverboy had fallen apart. I heard the door click. followed by the sound of her heels on the hardwood floor. The funny thing was I wasn't even panicked. No rush to cover anything up, no shame, no guilt. I wanted her to see this. I wanted her to walk in on me, to feel the same betrayal I had been drowning in for weeks. And then it happened. The bedroom door swung open, and there she was, standing in the doorway, her face contorting into an expression I'll never forget. It was a mixture of shock, disgust, and pure, unfiltered rage. Her mouth hung open, eyes wide with disbelief. She probably never thought in a million years that I would be capable of something like this. But there I was, in bed with her best friend. "What the fuck?" she screamed, her voice shaking the walls. Sarah, completely caught off guard, scrambled out of the bed, grabbing her clothes and trying to cover herself up. She looked like a deer in the headlights, not knowing what the hell to do. "Melissa, I didn't, I'm so sorry," she stammered, her face flushed red with embarrassment. She couldn't even meet Melissa's eyes. Without waiting for a response, Sarah bolted out of the room, probably running for her life, leaving me and Melissa to face off like two gunslingers in an old Western showdown. The door slammed behind her, and then it was just me and Melissa. For a moment, there was this eerie silence, like the calm before the storm. And then the storm hit. "You disgusting piece of shit," Melissa screamed, stepping toward me with fists clenched. I could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire I used to love, but now it was aimed right at me. "You fucked my best friend? In our bed? How dare you? You fucking hypocrite." I couldn't help but laugh. Her hypocrisy was almost laughable. The way she stood there, like she had the moral high ground, as if she hadn't been out screwing some other guy while pretending everything was just peachy at home. I got out of bed, not even bothering to cover myself. I wanted her to feel every ounce of this. "Hypocrite? Are you serious right now, Melissa?" I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've been fucking some other guy behind my back for weeks, and you think I'm the bad guy here?" "That's different," she screamed, her face twisting in anger. "We agreed to an open relationship, Derek. You crossed the line. Sarah's my best friend." I couldn't stop the laughter from bubbling up inside me. The absurdity of it all was almost too much. An open relationship? I scoffed. "That's rich coming from you. Don't even try to play the victim here, Melissa. I know about the affair. I've known for weeks. You think I didn't see this coming? You think I didn't know exactly what you were up to?" Her face paled for a second, and I knew she realized I had been playing her the whole time. "Wait, what?" she muttered, her voice suddenly small, vulnerable. "You knew?" "Of course I fucking knew," I snapped, stepping closer to her, my anger finally bubbling to the surface. "I knew the moment Michael saw you with that guy. I knew when you came home smelling like him. And then you had the nerve to pitch the open relationship bullshit, like I'd be dumb enough to fall for it. You've been lying to me this whole time, and now you want to act like I'm the one who crossed the line?" Melissa's face twisted in rage again, but this time, there was something else in her eyes, fear. She had lost control of the situation, and she knew it. You bastard," she spat, her voice trembling. "You set this whole thing up, didn't you?" I nodded, not even bothering to hide the satisfaction in my voice. "You're damn right I did. You think you can screw around behind my back, treat me like a fool, and get away with it? No. This is your mess, Melissa. You made this bed, and now you're going to lie in it. Alone." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability. But it was too late for tears, too late for apologies. We had crossed the line, and there was no going back. She screamed one last time, this guttural sound of pure frustration, then stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, my mind racing. It should have felt like victory, like I had finally gotten what I wanted. But in that moment, all I felt was emptiness. Sure, I had my revenge, but the cost? The cost was my marriage, my life as I knew it. I had burned it all to the ground, and now there was nothing left but the ashes. After the storm of our confrontation had died down, I knew what had to come next. There was no rebuilding this, no salvaging what was left. Everything between Melissa and me was broken beyond repair. So, while she was still seething from catching me with Sarah, I calmly told her the words she probably thought she'd never hear. "I'm filing for divorce." I expected her to erupt again, to scream, shout, throw something at me, anything to claw back some control in the situation. But for the first time that night, Melissa just stood there stunned. I guess it hadn't occurred to her that I might actually walk away. She probably thought I'd be the one begging for forgiveness, hoping to fix things. But no, the second she betrayed me, the marriage was over. I had just been waiting for the right time to make my move. "You can't be serious," she finally said, her voice shaky, but laced with desperation. "Derek, come on, don't be like this. We can work through this. The open relationship thing was supposed to help us, not ruin everything." I couldn't help but laugh. She still didn't get it, still couldn't see that the open relationship garbage was never going to fix anything. It was just her way of legitimizing her lies, making her affair seem like something progressive, when it was nothing more than selfishness wrapped in a trendy buzzword. Help us? Melissa, let's stop pretending, all right? You didn't want an open relationship to help us. You wanted it so you could keep screwing around and feel good about yourself while doing it. You thought I'd be dumb enough to buy into your little charade, but the truth is, I've known for weeks about you and your lover. Hell, even Michael knew. Her eyes widened, and for a second, I saw a real fear flash across her face. She knew now that this wasn't just me lashing out in the heat of the moment. She knew I had been playing the long game, quietly waiting, watching, and plotting. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. "Don't even try to spin this as some noble attempt to spice up our marriage," I said, shaking my head. "You lied to me, cheated behind my back, and then when you got caught, you tried to flip it around like it was for our benefit. It's pathetic, Melissa. And now it's over." She stepped forward, her hands trembling. "I made a mistake, okay? We both made mistakes. But we can fix this. I can fix this. We don't have to throw everything away." I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me again, but I forced it down. I'd been angry long enough. Now it was time to end this clean and simple. "There's nothing left to fix," I said coldly. "I don't trust you anymore, and without trust, there's no marriage. I'm done." Melissa broke down then. She cried, pleaded, tried to explain how she had been feeling stuck in the marriage, how the affair was her way of trying to feel alive again. But none of it mattered. Every word she said just felt hollow, like the same excuses I'd heard 1,000 times before from other people's stories. It was almost cliché, like she was reading from some script designed to manipulate me into staying. But I wasn't playing along. I walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing on the bed, and began packing my things. It felt surreal, like I was on autopilot, watching my life unravel while I calmly folded shirts into a suitcase. There was no more yelling, no more fighting. It was done. The revenge had been satisfying in the moment. But now that the dust was settling, all I felt was emptiness. I cut off contact with both Melissa and Sarah. I wasn't interested in hearing more apologies, explanations, or excuses. As far as I was concerned, they were both out of my life for good. Melissa, for obvious reasons, and Sarah, well, she had played her part in all this too. She may have been dragged into it because of my manipulation, but it didn't matter. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The divorce process was brutal, but quick. Melissa tried to fight it at first, but when she realized there was no saving us, she relented. We split everything down the middle. I didn't care about the house or the money. I just wanted out. Every conversation with her lawyer felt like I was peeling off a layer of my old life, shedding it piece by piece until there was nothing left but the bare bones of who I used to be. In the end, we signed the papers and it was over. Just like that. You'd think I would have felt a sense of victory, right? I had set my plan into motion, gotten my revenge, exposed her for the liar she was, and walked away without looking back. But the truth is, once everything was said and done, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt empty. Like all of that anger, all of that hate I had been carrying around had burned out, leaving behind this hollow space inside me. The revenge had been sweet, but it didn't fill the void that her betrayal had left behind. It didn't take away the pain or the sense of loss. I realized then that revenge wasn't the answer. Sure, it felt good in the moment, but it didn't bring back the years we had spent together or the trust that had been shattered. It was gone, and nothing I did could ever bring it back. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything. on our marriage, on how things had gone so wrong, and how I had let myself get to this point. I used to love Melissa, and maybe a part of me still did, but that love had been twisted by all the lies, all the secrets. I wasn't the same man I had been when we first got married, and she wasn't the same woman. But now, standing on the other side of it all, I realized that the only way forward was to let go. Not just of her, but of everything. The anger, the pain, the bitterness, it wasn't serving me anymore. It was just a weight I was carrying around, dragging me down, and I needed to let it go if I was ever going to move on. And so I did. I walked away from that chapter of my life, leaving Melissa and all of the baggage behind. It wasn't easy, and it sure as hell wasn't clean, but it was necessary. I had taken back control of my life, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. But even then, the question still lingered. Was it all worth it? I guess that's something I'll be asking myself for the rest of my life. After the dust settled and the divorce papers were signed, I found myself sitting across from Michael at a bar, reflecting on the madness of the past few months. We clinked our beers together, laughing at how ridiculous it all seemed now that it was over. Michael couldn't get over the fact that I'd pulled it off, how I had orchestrated everything so carefully. He kept shaking his head, saying, "Man, I can't believe you really did it. You made her pay." I chuckled, though it felt a bit hollow. Sure, there was some satisfaction in it all. Melissa had gotten what she deserved. But the truth was, the whole revenge plot hadn't left me feeling the way I thought it would. It wasn't the victory I'd hoped for. Still, we laughed over the insanity of it, like it was some twisted story that had happened to someone else. "What's next for you?" Michael asked, leaning back in his chair, watching me closely. That question hung in the air, and for the first time, I realized I didn't have a clear answer. I'd spent so much time focused on Melissa's lies, on getting even, that I hadn't thought about what life would be like after all of this. The one thing I knew for sure was that I wasn't going to chase after another relationship. The idea of getting involved with anyone else after everything that had happened, it made my skin crawl. "I think it's just me for a while," I said, sipping my beer. "No relationships, no drama. I need to figure things out on my own." Michael nodded. "That makes sense, man. After all that, you deserve some peace." That word, peace, stuck with me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't tied to someone else's lies or drama. I was free to focus on myself. And honestly, it was a relief. I didn't need to chase after happiness through someone else. I needed to find it in me. In the months that followed, I threw myself into work. My career became my distraction, my focus, and it was exactly what I needed. I started going to the gym regularly, picked up hobbies I hadn't touched in years, and began to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. It was strange, really, to realize how much of my identity had been tied to Melissa and the life we had built. Now, with her gone, it felt like I was getting a fresh start. The idea of starting a new relationship didn't even cross my mind. I wasn't interested. Betrayal leaves scars, and I wasn't ready to let anyone get close enough to cut me again. Trust was something I didn't have much of anymore, not after what Melissa had done. And honestly, I wasn't in a rush to rebuild it. For the first time in a long time, I was content just being on my own. Michael and I stayed close, of course. We'd meet up, laugh about the whole situation, but there was an unspoken understanding that I was different now. I had changed. The man who had been willing to trust, to love so easily, was gone. In his place was someone more cautious, more guarded. And while that might sound sad, it wasn't. It felt like self-preservation, like I was finally protecting myself from the kind of pain Melissa had put me through. As for Melissa, she faded into the background of my life. Once the divorce was finalized, I cut her off completely. No contact, no updates, nothing. In my mind, she was just a chapter of my life that I had closed for good. I didn't care what she was up to, and I wasn't interested in hearing from her. The same went for Sarah. She had played her part, and while I manipulated her into it, I didn't want anything to do with her anymore. I wanted to leave all of that behind. The truth is, revenge had been sweet in the moment, but in the end, it hadn't filled the emptiness Melissa's betrayal left behind. It didn't heal the wounds or bring back the trust we once had. It just brought closure and end to something that had been dragging on far too long. And while it hadn't felt like the victory I imagined, it had been necessary. In the months after, I found peace in the quiet. In the everyday things I had once taken for granted, go to work, hitting the gym, playing guitar, running. These were the things that started to rebuild me, piece by piece. I didn't need Melissa or anyone else to define who I was. I was learning to be content with just me. That's the lesson I took from all of this. Betrayal, trust, revenge, it's all complicated and painful, but in the end, it taught me something valuable. I didn't need someone else to make me whole. I didn't need to rebuild what had been broken. All I needed was to move forward, focus on my own life, and find peace within myself. And for the first time in a long time, I had that peace. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more drama. Just me, my work, my life. And that, to me, was enough.